May 29th, 1453. The day the walls of Constantinople fell, and with them the last breath of an empire that had once called itself eternal. Inside the golden heart of the city, the Hagia Sophia, thousands gathered. Men, women, children, and the holy sisters of Christ. They prayed not for victory, but for mercy. What happened within those walls after the Ottomans entered remains one of history's most tragic mysteries. For the nuns who sought sanctuary that morning, fate had something darker waiting. In the final years of Byzantium, faith was all that remained. The empire had lost its armies, its allies, its wealth, but it still had its God, or so they believed. Within the convents of Constantinople, the sisters lived by candlelight and silence. They prayed over crumbling walls, tended to the sick, and believed that holiness could protect what swords could not. Many of them came from noble families, daughters of generals, widows of lords. They traded silk for sackcloth, crowns for crosses, and when the city's fall grew near, they refused to flee. To them, abandoning Constantinople was abandoning God's will. One chronicle speaks of a convent near the Byzantine Palace, where nuns spent their final days copying sacred texts as cannon fire echoed outside the city walls, their ink mixed with tears, their prayers with the trembling of the earth. Before dawn, the sky turned black with smoke. Mehmed's cannons had torn through the Theodosian walls, the greatest fortification the world had ever known. The people of Constantinople ran to Hagia Sophia, their last refuge. Among them, dozens of nuns, their robes torn, carrying icons of Christ and the Virgin. They filled the vast marble hall, singing hymns as the gates of the city collapsed. Eyewitnesses wrote that the sound of prayer drowned even the roar of the cannons. The sisters believed a miracle would save them, that angels would descend as they had in legend when the city was first founded. But no angels came, only soldiers. The first Ottoman troops through the doors were not nobles or officers. They were irregulars, mercenaries promised loot and blood. They stormed the great church, tearing down icons, dragging people from the altars. A Venetian chronicler wrote, "The cries of women and the chanting of priests rose together, like two songs clashing in the same breath. The conquerors did not see holiness. They saw treasure in gold, in marble, and in flesh." When the city fell, Sultan Mehmed, only 21, rode into Hagia Sophia. He dismounted, looked around the shattered cathedral, and ordered silence. "No harm shall come to those who surrender," he said. And for many, mercy was granted. But mercy had its price. The Sultan's decree could not undo what the soldiers had already done. Within hours, the sanctuaries of the city had become prisons. Women of faith, Greek, Armenian, Latin, were gathered and separated. Some were sent to the harems of pashas, their vows stripped away like their veils. Others were taken as servants to noble households, marked as belonging to the Sultan's right of conquest. A few, history tells us, were brought directly to the palace, not for pleasure, but for politics. The Sultan's scholars debated what to do with these women who had belonged to Christ but now belonged to the empire. Conversion was offered. Islam, they said, could purify them of their old faith. Refusal meant servitude. Acceptance meant survival. Many refused, and history forgot their names. There is one story that survives, told in whispers by priests who escaped through the sea walls. They say that after the city fell, A group of nuns remained within Hagia Sophia. They refused to leave the altar. When the soldiers found them, they sang louder. When swords were drawn, they sang still. Their voices rose in defiance until they were silenced by the clash of steel. But the legend does not end there. According to a Greek manuscript preserved in Venice, the floor of the church opened, and the sisters were taken beneath it, hidden by the angels, to return when the city is free again. Even today, some claim that under the marble floors of Hagia Sophia, you can hear the faint echo of their chants when the wind passes through the stone. For those who survived, captivity began at dawn. The streets of Constantinople were lined with women, mothers, widows, and nuns, bound and silent. They were herded through the gates toward Galata, then loaded onto ships bound for Edirne and Bursa. In the Sultan's registry, they were recorded not by name, but by category. Greek woman of the convent, Latin woman of the cross, servant of the Sultan's spoils. One of these ships, a Genoese captain later wrote, carried a dozen nuns who had once served in the convent of St. Thecla. When he saw them, he said, they sat in silence, staring at the sea, their hands clasped in prayer, their eyes fixed on nothing. Some were sold in slave markets. Others disappeared into the palace system, the kitchens, the laundries, the inner halls of the imperial court. A few, it said, caught the attention of high officials and were offered conversion, a new name, a new life. But one chronicler, Critoboulos of Imbros, wrote this chilling line: they gave up their names, but not their silence. Within the walls of the new Ottoman capital, a strange transformation began. The nuns who had been taken into the palace lived under rules they could not understand. The language foreign, the customs alien. Some served as caretakers for other captives, washing, cooking, sewing. Others were absorbed into the harem's inner hierarchy, stripped of faith but trained in obedience. The Sultan himself, historians say, ordered that no violence be done to them once inside the palace. But he did not set them free. A few converted, willingly or not. They became Muslim women, silent, veiled, their past erased. One Italian traveler wrote that he met an old nun of the Hagia Sophia in Bursa years later, now a Muslim nurse named Fatima, tending to the wounded. When asked if she remembered her former life, she said only, "I remember the bells. I remember the fire. I remember my sisters singing." The fall of Constantinople was not only the fall of a city, it was the collision of two worlds. For those nuns, every breath became a prayer and a negotiation. To live was to betray their vows. To die was to abandon the chance of helping others. In hidden corners of the city, some continued their prayers in secret. Even in the harem, whispers of Christianity survived. In a gesture, a hymn hummed under the breath, a cross traced in candle smoke. There are Ottoman records of women caught praying in the Christian manner decades later, punished not with death, but with exile. The empire, it seems, feared faith more than rebellion. Centuries passed. The empire grew vast, reaching from the Balkans to Arabia, from Hungary to the deserts of Syria. And yet, in every conquered city, stories repeated. Women of the church, taken, lost, transformed. In the archives of Venice and Genoa, letters still survive, written by monks and traders who searched for lost sisters. They speak of ransom missions, of bribes paid to pashas, of whispered rumors that some nuns still lived in hidden quarters of the palace. But no records show their release, only silence. And in history, silence speaks the loudest. So what was their fate, truly? Did they die in defiance or live in silence? Did faith protect them or damn them? We may never know, but their story lingers in the marble and the dust, in the echo of prayers swallowed by time. For the fall of Constantinople was not only the end of an empire, it was the unmaking of a world of faith and the birth of a new one built upon its ashes. And if you listen closely, perhaps you can still hear them. The nuns who sang as the walls came down,